Good day, everyone. So welcome to our training on gender fair education, wherein we are going to discuss some techniques on how we can contribute in the attainment of gender fair education through instruction, through the materials that we are using, through gender fair language, and through the evaluation techniques that we can use in our classrooms or in our classes. Okay, so let's start. Okay, why do we have this gender fair education training? So we have this global campaign for education wherein education can play a key role in challenging gender-based violence and also in transforming patriarchal societies into ones that value equity, inclusion, and justice. So we know that education will really play a major role in re-education or in eliminating gender bias by eliminating gender stereotypes. And also, according to CEDAW, the elimination of prejudices and customary and all other practices which are based on the idea of the inferiority or the superiority of either of the sexes or on stereotype roles for men and women constitutes the main challenge to identify new education policies. So being able to identify the different problems that we are facing in education and being able to identify gender issues and gender concerns, so we can do something in our educational policy so that we can attain gender fair education. So let us recall, during our trainings, we always show this framework, the framework of understanding the origins of gender issues. The major gender issue that we are facing is gender inequality. But before gender inequality, it has started from gender discrimination, then also from gender bias, and the root cause would be gender stereotyping. Now, let us recall again, what would be gender stereotypes? When we say gender stereotypes, those are, for example, terms which are coined to a particular gender. Halimbawa, sweet, soft. They attribute that characteristic to female. Pag malakas, they always attribute that to male. But we are trying to change that, of course, because we have series of trainings about gender sensitivity. Kaya konti-konti, in our educational system, we try to eliminate that gender stereotyping because that is considered to be the root cause of gender inequality. Okay? So we can really play a role to eliminate gender inequality because nasa atin din yung susi para ma-eliminate yung stereotyping. Gender issues, as explained by the framework, emanate from cultural factors which may only be understood and changed through transformed ways of understanding society. So, education plays a role in that transformation ng ating society. Education and re-education about the origins of gender issues will help pave the way to respect for human rights and also to attain gender equality. Okay? So let's take a look at this illustration. As I have mentioned, we are trying to attain gender equality, but look at these materials. Maybe you can also review the modules that we are using right now. And tignan natin kung meron pang mga gender stereotypes. Let's have this as an example. Boys are doctors. Girls are nurses. Kahit yung mga sa primary level, tignan natin yung mga illustrations of the materials that they are using. And then you can check if there are still gender stereotypes. Kasi those illustrations can really affect the children. Kung paniniwala nila, by looking at that illustration, you have to be a boy for you to become a doctor. And nurses are always girls. So, tingnan natin yung materials. This is just a simple illustration of gender stereotypes which can be found in learning materials. Okay, again, we are trying to attain gender equality. For example, this one, of course, girls and boys are equal. But looking at the textbooks, looking at the materials, which play a role also in the education of the students, tingnan nyo yung textbooks. Ano yung pinoportray na role ng babae at role ng lalaki. Okay, here are also some examples of gender stereotypes. Men are stronger than women. Women are soft and weak. Men are insensitive. Women are very sensitive. So we have this what we call also unconscious bias. Because we are used to it, lagi nating napapakinggan, parang unconscious na tayo na there is really gender bias. It's like normal lang yun para sa atin, pero meron na palang bias. Okay? So that is known to be unconscious bias. So what we are trying to do now is para maging conscious ulit tayo or maging aware of those biases and stereotypes. Okay, I will just give some examples of gender bias in school. Operates in all facets of school life. So we can look into the curriculum, the subject matter, the learning experience that we are giving our students, the evaluation procedures that we are using, the educational materials. Sa educational materials pa lang, we can look at the content, the language, the illustration, the classroom interaction. Do we give equal opportunities sa male and female students natin? And also the LGBTQ+. Then, how do they interact in the classroom? In the examination or assessment techniques, ano yung mga ginagamit nating evaluation techniques? We will discuss this in detail later. And also in the school organization, well represented ba ang male and female? For example, you have for students, organization of students, well represented ba ang male and female students? Organization of the university, well represented din ba ang male and female faculty and officials? Okay. So why do we want to eliminate gender bias, discrimination, gender stereotypes? Because it can actually go a long way if we will not eliminate it. Looking at this, I was not able to screenshot a particular advertisement or a particular announcement wherein they are hiring seafarers, pero nakalagay doon, preferably male. So because of our unconscious bias na baka mas malakas yung mga mas kailangan ng lakas doon sa trabaho na yon. So, mas malakas ang mga lalaki. So, they prefer male. They prefer na ang i-hire nila ay male. So, from that stereotype lang, it could go to gender discrimination. Dahil pwede nang hindi ma-employ ang mga babae, even though they are qualified. So, also women in STEM. If we are going to look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, there are female students who are now taking engineering courses. But when it comes to hiring, meron pa ring inequality. So we have here 24% women in STEM jobs. Meron pa ring disproportionate between men and female na applicants when we talk about engineering, okay? So even though tignan natin yung qualifications nila, baka hindi sila naman na-hire just because they are female. So it could go a long way. That's why we, the educators, we really have a role para matanggal natin yung stereotype na yan. Okay? So that our students will be aware also of their rights. Now, I will show you what are the entry points. If we are going to attain gender fair education, here are the entry points. We can look into the instruction. We can look into educational policies. We can look into research programs and also capital outlay projects of the university. Siyempre, the teachers will play major role dun sa instruction and also research. And then the administrations will play major role when it comes to policies, programs, and capital outlay projects. So, iisa-isahin po natin yan so that we will be able to know how can we attain gender fair education through those entry points. Okay, if we have to look at this puzzle or if we have to look at this building, yan, it also includes monitoring and evaluation, involving parents and the community, learning institution, healthy and safe, physical environment, curricula, textbooks, other instructional materials, enrollment, attendance, completion rates, and learning outcomes, learning institution access, educator training, professional development of the teachers, teaching methods that we use in the classroom, facilitation and classroom management, extracurricular activities, and psychosocial support. So, the entry points, yung 5 entry points, pwede pa nating himay-himayin into these components. So, we can also look into gender and education, 3 parts. We have gender equality to education opportunities which is considered to be the access to education. Yun ang isa po natin titingnan. Then within education, we refer to the contents, the teaching practices, the learning practices, the methodology that we are using in the classroom, the learning materials that we are using, the classroom, the interaction that we are having. And then we also have this, the last one would be the through education, the learning outcomes. Do our students attain that competency that they need? Equal ba yung competencies attained by male and female? Equal ba yung opportunities given to them so that they will be competent? And then, we also look into the life and work opportunities. Pareho ba sila nabibigyan ng opportunities when it comes to employment? Okay? So, titignan po natin yung 3 parts ng gender and education. Okay, so now let's talk about access to education. As I mentioned, there are 3 components in gender and education. We have, the first one would be the access. Okay, we are going to look into equal opportunities when it comes to access to education. Pareho ba yung babae at lalaki? Are they given equal opportunities para ma-access nila yung education? Let's say, let's look at the different courses. So, lahat ba sila merong access doon? Maybe the course could be engineering, industrial technology, and other courses which were known to be parang male course. But right now, as we have mentioned, we are trying to eliminate that stereotype. So, kailangan open na tayo dun sa lahat ng courses ay pwede sa babae at lalaki. So, if they are not given that opportunity just because of their gender, so that means there is already gender discrimination when it comes to access to education. We can also look into the enrollment by gender. So, you can see here, male yung sa blue, and then red yung sa female. Looking at this record, from 1970 to 2009, nagbabago ng trend. Now, there is an increase in female students being enrolled. This is for basic education. So, you can see na nagbago yung trend. There are more female students who are enrolled than male students. So, meron na ring inequality because hindi nagkapantay yung access to education. Like, males and females, sana equal yung access nila into education. So, we can look into our enrollment data. Are we giving equal opportunities sa ating mga estudyante? So, let's take a look at the enrollment data. But of course, syempre, depende pa rin doon sa qualifications ng mga estudyante. So, there is a limitation to that, to the enrollment data. But, very particular then, if we will look into the other data. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Boys are underperforming in key education indicators compared to girls according to PCW. Even though, let's say, equal yung access. But, looking into the performing indicators, looking into the education indicators, na-outperform ng girls ang mga lalaki. So, we can look into the reasons bakit ganon. Bakit hindi napantay yung results? Hindi napantay yung mga abilities ng students after education. Bakit mas nagpa-perform well ang mga girls compared to boys? So, we can look into that. Let's say, hindi equal yung enrollees natin. Male and female enrollees natin. Hindi equal. Because, of course, there are other qualifications that we have to look into. Pero, when it comes to, let's say, nag-perform sila, nag-exam sila, or nag-battery exam sila, then let's take a look at their performances. Do boys perform better than girls, or girls perform better than boys? If there's already a discrepancy, or there is already an inequality in their performance, then we can look into why do they perform better than the other gender or than the other sex. So, what could be the reason behind it? Okay? So, we can look into that. Boys are underperforming in the key education indicators compared to girls. And also, there is a tendency that female rate of retention is higher for each level of education, let's say for basic education, for secondary, and parents' decision to have their sons help them earn a living rather than go to school. So, looking at the basic education system, meron po yun, we will look into retention, mas mataas din ang percentage ng retention ng female students compared to boys. The reason behind it, because boys are encouraged na magtrabaho na. than go to school. So that is also gender inequality. That is also a gender issue. Hindi, again, gender equality is not just for female. Hanggat nagkakaroon ng inequality between male, female, and other genders, so meron tayong gender issue. So we can look into that. Then, as I have mentioned, we look into the enrollment rates. Are we giving equal opportunities for male and female students? Look into the dropout rates. So, mas malaki ba ang dropout kapag male or mas malaki ba kapag female? And then, we can investigate. We can do a research on why is it that dropout rate for male would be higher than female or vice versa. And then, looking into the retention also. Sino ang mas mag-retain dun sa course na yon? So, after second year, transition to third year, do both male and female students were able to move into the next level? So, equal ba na yung, let's say, yung number nila before, male and female, would be the same in the next level? Pag hindi, what could be the reason behind it? So, we can investigate that. Now, let's take a look also at the transition. So, from basic education to secondary education to college level, same po ba yung transition percentage ng male and female? So, we can look into that. That would be the access to education or equality in the access to education. Okay, schooling, even at the basic education level, is perceived by many parents in rural and remote areas as valuable for the family in the short term. So, changing the mindset of parents is also necessary. So, this is very particular or this is very applicable sa basic education. Yun nga, female students are no longer encouraged to go to school because they have to work. So, yun kasi yung immediate need nila. So, yung makapagtrabaho na. So, there is a certain university, this is a good practice, na meron silang the family education program, wherein the parents are reoriented. That education can also actually help them so that we encourage them to enroll their children and to have the benefits of being educated na magagamit din nila in the future. Okay? Sa pag nagkaroon na sila ng mga careers. So while in the last few years, there has been much progress in moving the global education discourse from inputs, as I have mentioned, that is enrollment and parity to access to education, to outcomes learning. This welcome movement does not go far enough. So yun nga, even though we attain parity or we have equal access to education, we have to look into the outcomes. So, pareho ba natin na-develop ang mga estudyante regardless of their gender, okay? In order to seriously, this is according to Dr. Urvashi Sani, in order to seriously meet the goal of gender equality, the global discourse must go beyond numbers and embrace a life outcomes approach. So, yun nga yung una natin, the access to education, but we have to go beyond that. Let's look into the learning outcomes. Pareho ba silang capacitated after schooling? Let's say, after secondary level or after senior high school, are they given equal opportunities para mag-proceed to college? So, meron ba silang competencies that they need? Or after college naman, are they also competent enough? So, or do we give them equal opportunities to be competent? Ganon din ba yung competency na na-meet ng mga babae? Ganon din ba yung competency na na-meet ng mga lalaki? Because if there is imbalance, so ano yung support na pwede nating ibigay sa kanila so that they will also be competent? So that is access to education. Now, let's move on to instruction. So dito, the faculty members, we teachers, will really play a major role in the gender fair education when it comes to instruction. So let's take a look at how we can attain it. So when we say instruction, it has different components also. We have the curriculum, the instructional materials, pedagogies, or the learning strategies that we are using, the gender fair language, and also the teachers that we have. Yes, I have mentioned this one earlier that we are trying to attain gender equality, but the materials that we are using would not be gender fair. or there are still gender stereotypes. So gender biases and stereotypes remain and are still embedded in the curricula, instructional materials, and learning media. That's according to PCW. So meron pa ring problem. Existence of gender stereotypes and gender bias in learning materials, meron pa rin. Content of learning materials have a long-term effect on the acquisition process of values and attitudes on the part of students, especially in the primary level. Mabilis silang maimpluwensyahan. Let's say sa mga illustrations natin, we have bombero, fireman. So, they are always male. So, meron na tayong mga bomberong babae. So, better use an illustration na meron din ng mga babaeng bombero. And they are known to be firefighters. Okay? Doctors. Yung nakita nyo kanina, they are illustrated, so, na male. So, we also have doctors na female. Engineers, or science courses, yun nga, it's not just for male students, but it's also for female. Teaching or education, sabi nila pambabae daw yung pagtuturo. So, again, it's a stereotype. So, we have to eliminate that. We can have some illustrations na lalaki naman yung portrayal ng ating teacher. So, those are just simple examples. So, I want you to look into your modules if there are gender stereotypes. Sometimes nga, we are no longer aware. Hindi naman natin sinasadya because that would be an unconscious bias. But if we now have that gender lens after this training, and then you review your modules, you review your materials, you might be able to see some stereotypes. Okay? So again, this is the framework, and what we are trying to do is to eliminate the root cause of gender inequality, which is gender stereotypes, which can be found in our instruction, in our learning materials, in our strategies, in our evaluation procedures. So yan, marami pa rin po yan. Gender roles are being portrayed in books na ganyan nyo. Pag politicians, they are male. Carpenters, male. Teachers are female. Men are considered to be more suitable for engineering and technical professions, while the women are for fields such as economics and social sciences. So, right now, yung courses natin, these are open to everyone. So, male, female, they have equal access to the courses that we are offering. So, yan nga po yung mga nabanggit ko na materials or books. Yan, pag engineer, naka-yellow na cup. So, lalaki. Pag farmer, lalaki. Pag baker, babae. Pag fisher folk, lalaki, or fisherman, lalaki. So, this one is another illustration of gender stereotype. If you are going to read this, yan, letter B, babae, sagisag ng kahinaan. Puri ang kayamanan. Hinhin ang katangian at ganda ang puhunan. Buhay na hiram lamang, pinagmulan ng sangkatauhan. So, yan. Yung mga characteristics like mahina, puri ang kayamanan, and so on. So, magkakaroon ng long-term effect sa ating mga students. Okay? So, as parents also, we can look at the materials of our children. So, i-review natin if there are existing gender stereotypes, and then we can explain it to our students. If we also have guests, or if we have viewers from the Department of Education, tingnan din po natin, we can review again the materials that we are using if there are gender stereotypes, especially in the basic level or the elementary level, kasi it will really have a long-term effect on our students. Okay? Like this one. This is a book portraying the roles of mother and father. So you can see here, mother introduces the world to you, mother introduces you to the world, mother gives you life, father gives you living, mother teaches you walking, father teaches you walk of life. So, magkaiba sila. Pero we have this, what we call shared parenting na, that mother and father will play same roles in parenting a child. Okay? So, kasi nga shared parenting na siya is a shared responsibility. Okay, ito pa po. It's again an elementary book. Katulong ng tatay ang nanay sa pamamahala ng pamilya. Ilaw ng tahanan naman ang tawag sa kanya. Bakit kaya karaniwan ay siya ay namamahala na sa bahay? Sa kanya ay pinagkakatiwala ni tatay ang perang sinasahod sa pinagtrabahuhan. Siya ang nagbabudget nito. So, you see, meron na siyang role, the classic role of a mother, na tinatanggal na po natin yung stereotype na yan. Pwede rin namang lalaki yung nagbabudget, pwede rin naman siya nagmamanage sa bahay. Okay, ito pa. Mr. Thompson is in the garage now. He blank to wash his car. Mrs. Thompson is in the kitchen. So, you can see the roles. Very, very visible siya dun sa material na to, ang different roles ng mother and father. But right now, yun nga, they can both do that. Yeah, we have this suggestion for revision. Yan, pwede na current status sa managing ng household chores, pwede nating idagdag si tatay. Okay? If we will review the syllabus also, or our syllabi, we can look into these guidelines or steps. Review the formulation of the course title. About history of mankind, we can change it to humanity. Kasi doon sa mankind, nandun na rin po yung general term or generic term na man. Review of the course objectives and descriptions. Can the course objectives, as originally formulated, promote the students' learning and appreciation of human rights and gender equality dimensions? If we can add in our objectives, kung kaya naman po na we attain for gender equality, we can add it to the general objectives. Do we have or do we use sexist terms or words? We can check into that. And the course description as originally formulated reflect the integration of course topics na pwede, like there are social sciences subjects na pwede nating i-integrate ang human rights discussion and gender equality policies. Sa language subjects, pwede rin po nating ipasok ang gender fair language. Sa science subjects, we can also look into the roles of female scientists. So, pwede po natin siyang i-add. So, let's take a look at our syllabus or our course, and then we look into how we can integrate a gender topics or gender course in our subject. Analysis of gender biases in the theories and perspectives as discussed in the course content. Do the theories and perspective include in the original course syllabus explicitly or implicitly legitimize gender role stereotyping? So, i-review natin kung meron na agad stereotypes do sa mga theories that we are discussing. There could be, syempre, in history, there are really gender stereotypes. So, ang entry point natin is to explain that what we are trying to do now is to change that. Since, ano na ba yung naging effect nung gender inequality in history? So, what were the effects? Marami mga female na hindi nakapag-college. Na kaya ang mga nare-recognize nating scientists, historians are male. So, yun yung naging epekto. So, that's an entry point of a discussion wherein what we are trying to do now is to remove that gender stereotypes. And so that we can attain gender equality. So, pwede po nating pasukan yun in our discussion. Okay? That's why we can say that it's mainstreaming gender concerns. So, that means even though we are just discussing in our lecture, tapos pinasok natin yung gender issue or gender concept, then that we already have mainstream gender in our instruction. Are there available feminist commentaries that challenge these sexist theories that can be included in the course syllabus? As I review some modules, kasi part of the program also of Gender and Development Office is to review some of the modules. Kaya lang hindi pa po lahat na re-review. But for those reviewed modules, may nakita po ako dyan mga, like for example, definitions. Meron sila mga pinaprovide na definitions like, we have male scientists, male historians, male linguists, definitions. Meron din iba, it's a good thing that they have provided yung mga female counterparts. But merong iba, since nga, in the history kasi, karamihan talaga, let's say historians, they are male. Pero right now, we already have female historians. We already have female scientists. We already have female mathematicians. So, pwedeng yung mga definitions nila, even though modern siya, we can actually add it in our discussion. So, that is another tip. So that we can have equal representation of male and female. Okay? Then are there other theories and perspectives that can replace those used in the core syllabus to better highlight the principles of human rights and gender equality? So, pag nakita nyo po, since alam naman natin yung subject matter natin, if you can look into the theory na pwede natin ipasok doon sa discussion, then we can add that to our core syllabus and of course to our discussions. Okay, let's take a look at the last one. Pareho na po yung mga nauna. Review of activities for possible gender biases. Do the class activities reproduce gender role stereotyping that explicitly or implicitly promoted gender inequality? Do the activities expose especially female students to physical, sexual, or other forms of harm? We can look into the activities ng mga estudyante natin. Let's say, common problem daw to sa physical education. I'm not saying that we have the same problem, but in research, may mga institutions kasi that yung mga female students, hindi masyado silang ine-engage sa physical activity in physical education. So, yun yung titingnan natin. Are they both engaged dun sa physical activity that they have to do in class unless meron talaga silang mga concerns like health problem. Halimbawa, lalaki naman yung may health problem na hindi niya talaga pwedeng gawin yung physical activity na yun. So, hindi natin siya pwedeng pilitin dahil lalaki siya. Okay? So, also, we have to ensure that our students are safe, na hindi sila nagiging victims ng harassment. So, here are the other guidelines for engendering the curriculum. We can look into the assessment procedures and the forms of evaluation and also the test construction. Now, do you know also that female students perform better in essay type of questions or essay type of exams than male, and male perform better in multiple choice type of exams? We have to use varied types of questions so that we give equal opportunities to our male and female students so that they will be performing well. Now, meron kasi, as we have mentioned, meron talagang differences ang babae at lalaki. But we have to work on that differences so that still, the learning outcomes that they can develop would be the same kahit babae or lalaki. Okay, there are times that we have to have additional support for male students or additional support for our female students. Okay, next, let's take a look at this illustration. Teacher training can help overcome explicit gender bias. So that's why we are having this training. So part of the program of education to attain gender fair education is to train the teachers so that they will be gender sensitive and gender responsive for obvious reason. So tayo yung unang nakakasalamuhan ng ating mga estudyante. So if we wanted to have gender fair education, especially when it comes to instruction, the learning materials, we have to train the teachers so that they will be gender sensitive and gender responsive. Teachers need to be trained in understanding how their perceptions or expectations of male and female students may influence how they assess students' progress, mark tests, and also provide feedback. Now, during recitation, we might be unconscious, but this time we will now be conscious kapag nagtatawag ba tayo, let's say in math. Pag nagtatawag ba tayo ng estudyante natin, do we give them equal opportunities ang male or female? Or mas binabato natin yung questions sa male? Okay, let's talk about engineering courses. Mas tinatanong ba natin ang male because we know that we have this connotation that they perform better in math? Or do we also give opportunities sa female student natin na magaling din naman sa math? So see, this time we have to be aware of that we are giving equal opportunities sa ating mga estudyante. Okay, halimbawa, this teacher, Arthur is a stay-at-home dad. So since na-orient na siya, na meron din naman mga stay-at-home dad. So teacher, a well-trained teacher, when it comes to gender fair education, of course, will be our instrument para ma-attain yung gender fair education. Okay, let's take a look at this gender fair pedagogy. So this is from Forum of African Women Educationalists. So they have this gender responsive pedagogy. The model is designed to cultivate in teachers the knowledge, skills, attitudes that enable them to respond to the learning needs of girls and boys by using gender-sensitive teaching and learning processes and practices. Syempre, if we are now aware of it, if we are aware of the needs of male and female students, then we have to attend to both needs. Mapababae man yan or mapalalaki. Okay? If we have to have additional support dahil mahina sila sa ganitong subject, regardless of their gender, we have to give them the support that they need. Okay? Review of class activities for possible gender biases. I already have mentioned it. Let's say sa HE, right now, ang HE naman ay hindi rin pang babae lang. So, sa pagluluto, dapat lahat ng activities under HE na pa-perform din ng babae at lalaki. Let's say, I'm not sure kung meron pa nito ngayon, but during my high school days, meron pang woodworking. So, sa woodworking ba, pareho bang pinapagawa ng activity yung babae at lalaki? Are we giving them equal opportunities? Sa electronics or electricity, nabibigyan din ba natin ng opportunity ang mga babae na equal do sa mga opportunity na binibigay sa mga lalaki? Okay? So, we look into the different practices that we are having inside the classroom if nagkakaroon ng gender bias or discrimination. Then, equal opportunities in class activities. So, we encourage that we use cooperative learning, classroom management, and also in the patterns of rewarding. So, pareho ba sila or are we giving equal rewards? So, next component, still part of the instruction and also the learning materials that we are using would be the language that we use. So, when I review some modules, very visible po yung paggamit ng generic term na he, him, if the person is unknown. So, we have to look into that. So, tingnan po natin to common usage like anchorman, so term man, businessman, congressman, fireman, policeman, statesman. So, that's a generic use of man. So, tingnan po natin yun na may mga alternatives naman like anchor person, business owner or entrepreneur, representative, firefighter, police officer, political leader. So, we can use those terms na tatanggalin na lang natin yung man so that pwede siya sa male and sa female. So, here are some guidelines in non-sexist writing in our modules. So, we can look into this. We have here, replace the term man, like say, manpower into labor and human resource, mankind into humanity. In making general statements, also we can add women, like man is a rational being. Women and men are rational beings. So, pwede naman natin idagdag ang women. The pronouns he and his are used to replace the generic man. The following are some alternatives. When I was in elementary, naalala ko meron tayong rule. If hindi nyo alam kung sino yung person, if lalaki o babae, we always use him, his, he. So, lagi yon. But this time, since we now have this gender fair language, hindi dapat palaging he, him, or his. So, these are the techniques we have here. The student must submit his paper on time. Yun yung before. Students must submit their papers on time. So, because yung kanina, hindi natin alam yung person, gumamit tayo ng generic his. When we change it to plural, like students must submit their papers. So, it becomes their. Pwede ng male and female. That's why in Filipino, maganda nga sa Filipino because we have a gender fair language. Wala tayo yung mga pangbabae o panglalaki like sa kanya, siya, sayo, and so on. Okay? A researcher must also acknowledge his sources according to this one. So we can change it to this. A researcher must acknowledge all sources. I-drop na lang yung his. Okay? Use both female and male pronouns but vary the order. Pwede naman din gamitin yung his. Pwede gamitin yung her. Pero we alternate. Tapos, wag yung palagi daw nauuna naman yung sa lalaki. Okay? Alternate male and female pronouns throughout the text. Now, there are also examples na napansin ko na may mga statements na ang palagi niyang example ay mga lalaki. So, if you review the module, tignan niyo po, we are not aware of it or hindi naman siya sinasadya, Pero nakita ko mga examples, mostly ay mga lalaki. So, we can represent both male and females in our examples, okay? So, pwede po nating i-review ulit yung mga susunod nating modules na well-represented ang male and female. Identify both men and women in the same way when it comes to profession or employment. Like, for example, doctor. Pwede naman daw hindi na doktora. Doctor na lang. Doctor, we are referring to male and female doctors. So, stewardess or steward, we can actually have flight attendant. So, generic term na yan, either male or female, flight attendant. And then, meron ginagamit before na male nurse. We can just use the term nurse, either male or female, okay? And then, do not represent women or men as occupying only certain jobs. So, hindi nga sinasadya, pero it's an unconscious bias. Look at this. The teacher. So on and so forth. She. Then, we can use the teacher. Sometimes we can use he because we have male teachers. The engineer statement. He. But we have female engineers, so we can also have the engineer. Blah, blah, blah. She. Okay. Avoid language also that trivializes women and reinforces stereotyped images, like a man-sized job. Pag sinabing man-sized daw, it's a big job. So just use a big job, hindi na yung a man-sized job. She did well for a woman. So parang minamaliit ka niya bilang babae. You can just mention she did well. Huwag na yung she did well for a woman. Okay? So, those are about instruction, curriculum, instructional materials, assessment procedures, and teacher training. So, that would be part of education and gender through education. Now, let's take a look at this another component, which is the policy making. We have here school management. They also play a major role in attaining gender fair education. We have here the school management is responsible to formulate, apply, and monitor rules and regulations that will transform school into gender-responsive environment. So, lagi tayo may training on gender sensitivity. But what we are trying to attain now is to be gender-responsive. That means we can respond now to the needs of male and female students, male and female faculty, male and female personnel, or from being gender sensitive, we can now be gender responsive. We can respond to the gender issues. We can now resolve the gender issues that may exist. So, dun papasok si policy making. So, provide human resources for efficient gender responsive management and governance of the school. So, let's take a look at this component. Well represented din ba ang babae at lalaki when it comes to policy makers? Siyempre, we have different views. Male, female, we look at different things or we look at things differently. That's why it's very important that they are well represented. I'm not sure in the case of our university, mas marami daw yata. I think before nasabi, mas marami ang mga babae. So, we also have to look into that. Kasi baka hindi rin po natin na-represent yung mga gender issues or concerns ng mga lalaki. Kung mas marami naman yung mga lalaking administrators or leaders, we look into that also, baka hindi rin represented yung mga gender issues or concerns ng mga babae. Okay? Women are underrepresented in the structural position and the limited understanding of education, administrators, and managers about the importance of gender equality. Gender bias, there could be gender bias in the decision-making process if they are not well represented. Kasi nga, looking at this one, iba yung pananaw ng mga babae, iba rin yung pananaw ng mga lalaki. We have to admit that we really have differences, but we just need to resolve that differences. Basta ang main aim natin is to attain equality. Again, it's not a war of sexes. So, para-pareho tayo na objective to attain equality and to orient our students so that they will be gender sensitive and then they can also contribute in the attainment of gender equality. And then they will not be victims of gender discrimination and gender bias. Look at the gender ratio of school principals and administrators. So, applicable po to sa basic education, secondary education, and even in the college level. So, looking at the policies, So, of course, hindi yan agad-agad mababago natin yung policy. But in our university, I think we already have policy sa haircut ng our students that I think mga gay students are now allowed to have long hair. Dahil napapansin ko naman, pinapapasok naman sila ng ating guard. So, the policy makers will have roles with that. So, titingnan natin po kung nakakahadlang ba yung haircut nila. Kung hindi naman, so we might as well accept them since they can also perform with that preference na kung gusto nila mahaba yung buhok nila. But I think, of course, different colleges, they have different policies on that. Okay? And we also have to respect that. But ang pwede lang po natin tingnan kung pwede ba siya maging gender issue. Okay, so, titingnan na lang po natin yung we can conduct a research on that if kung ba, gusto nyo ipa-exe yung buhok nila. Nakaka-affect ba yun sa pagkatao nila? Or very willing naman sila because it's a school policy. Okay? So, we can review that. Women and girls continue to be vulnerable to harassment and violence inside the school. Yeah, that's according to PCW. So, ang sexual harassment is still a major concern in the universities or in different institutions. So, we also have a policy on that. Kaya nga nagkaroon na po tayo ng training on RA 11313. If you are not able to attend, pwede pa rin po dun sa live natin. And then, also, we have CODI in our institution. So, meron tayong guidelines for addressing sexual harassment concerns. Gender-responsive basic education policy. This is in the case of DepEd to understand and protect boys, girls, and LGBT children and teachers from all forms of gender-related violence. So, yun nga, covered naman tayo lahat ng RA 11313. Kailangan lang natin ay awareness. And also, tayo sa ating institution, as I have mentioned, we have this CODI for addressing sexual harassment. Another entry point that we can have to attain gender-fair education is mainstreaming gender in research. So, yan po. These were the identified issues, but this is in the case of basic education. But I think it is also applicable sa, may mga issues po dyan na applicable also sa college level. Like, for example, teenage pregnancy. So, yan ang major concern right now. Child labor. Child labor is one of the reasons bakit yung retention and transition bumababa yun sa mga lalaki. Teenage pregnancy naman could be one of the reasons bakit yung sa transition bumababa yun sa mga babae. And then we also have, meron pa rin daw gender stereotypes. This problem still exists. And there are cultural practices that somehow is considered as a gender issue. And then bullying also is a major concern. So yan po yung mga gender issues identified. Then work after education, sexual harassment, violence against women and children, teachers' absences and liabilities, and teachers' insensitivity. Now, saan papasok doon yung research? We will be able to identify the problems if we can also do research and we look into the gender issues. So, here are examples na na-identify or na-share when we had the training with the Department of Education. So, yan po yung mga concerns na na-share ng ating mga teachers. So, there might be other concerns which need to be addressed, kulang lang sa pag-identify on what are those concerns, okay? Now, we can use these tools like the Harvard Analytical Frameworks. It's based on economic argument for the analysis of access and control of resources. And this has been commonly used in schools to reveal discrimination and stereotyping. So, pwede natin gamitin po yung tool na to. So, for example, this one. Yeah, looking at this, papasagutan lang natin sila sa activities and then we can check if there is still an imbalance in the work performed by men and women. So, yan lang po yung mga examples. And we can ask our students to answer this one. And we can also ask our teachers, our personnel, to answer this one. And then, pwede na dun lalabas kung ano yung mga gender issue. Okay, but upon analyzing this tool. Yan po, access and control. So, who has particular access to resources, land, equipment, and so on. Yung mga benefits, mga loans. So, do we give equal access sa babae at lalaki? Sa pag-own ng assets, do they have equal access? O, yun po. Diyan natin pwede ipasok ang gender sa research. And then, of course, we can mainstream gender in our programs. Then, we always participate. Like, ngayon, kasama pa rin po tayo sa ating 18-day campaign period. An 18-day campaign to end violence against women and children. And then, we also have this celebration, National Women's Month celebration. Lagi tayo nagpa-participate dyan. And then, of course, we ask our students also to participate so that they will be aware. We have here capital outlay projects na pwede ring entry point so that we can have gender-responsive program or gender-fair education. Pwede rin to sa mga estudyante natin at sa faculty. So, we have here all-gender restroom, breastfeeding room, kahit sa mga estudyante natin na mothers na. So, if they have to produce milk, tapos mag-express sila ng milk, dapat meron tayong breastfeeding area or breastfeeding room. Yan po yung plan by next year na magkakaroon tayo ng breastfeeding room na pwede sila magpa-breastfeed or pwede na sila mag-express ng milk for storage na pwede nilang dalhin sa bahay. We can also have nursing area for our faculty members, yun nga, breastfeeding area. And then we have to have yung punla natin na sana po, dahil nga pandemic ngayon, hindi rin pwede ang mga bata. So, by next year, may set up na po natin ang ating punla daycare na hopefully can cater our faculty members, our employees, and also our students na mga parents na or mga nanay na. Okay, here are some other points to summarize how we can attain gender fair education and how we can have gender responsive program in our institution. Number 1, advocate gender equality in all aspects of development and ensure that our programs, projects, and activities are made congruent with this policy. Number 2, include in the school calendar the observance and celebrations of God-related activities like anti-vowsy campaign, Women's Month, and of course, we have to involve our students in those activities. Ngayon, dahil hindi sila pwede, but we can still have these activities, online nga lang siya. We can still ask our students to participate. Yun nga, meron pa rin po tayo mga series of activities that you can share with our students. So, please do so. So, that is also a simple way of contributing to gender fair education is that we can increase the awareness of our students. Okay? Halimbawa po, RA 11313, it is very important that they know that. And ang CODI ng school, yun sa sexual harassment. And then also, we have gender sensitivity trainings na online po and still available. You just have to ask the link from us na pwede nyo lang naman i-share sa mga estudyante. And then, pwede natin kunin yung responses nila or dun sa seminar or training. And then next, provide adequate and responsive capacity building activities for teachers. That's why we are having this training para lahat po maging aware. And then we can get some techniques on how to make our materials gender sensitive. And then our teaching techniques, gender sensitive and gender fair. Provide adequate and responsive capacity building activities for teachers in dealing with children in conflict with the law and also children at risk. So, yun pa yung mga pwede po nating gawin. Strengthen and sustain the capacity of administrators, counselors, guidance counselors, and teachers in handling violence or cases of violence, abuse, discrimination, exploitation, and bullying. As I have mentioned, bullying is one of the problems of our students also. And gather and analyze sex disaggregated data and gender information for informed decision making. Yun nga po yung pwede natin, we look into the enrollment rates, the dropout rate, the transition rate, pwede rin sa passing rate, sa mga board exams. Kung meron bang gender issue with regard to that. Then formulate, recommend, and implement policies on the sports development aligned with RA 9710, Section 14, or Women in Sports. Okay? So these are just some other recommendations to attain gender fair education. Okay. Hopefully you have learned something from this training and you can apply it to your modules. Dahil ngayon po, wala pa tayong face-to-face, but we can review the modules or the learning materials that we are sending our students kung wala na pong gender stereotypes. And then with regard to assessment procedures, again, yun nga, we can use combination of assessment procedures so that it will be fair for our students, okay? Then, if we have time also to know about their concerns and issues that could actually be related to gender and we can address it, then we can do that, okay? So, see you in the next trainings. Siguro pa next year po, may mga trainings tayo ulit. Thank you very much for your participation. And again, I'm encouraging you to share our trainings. Marami pong naka-upload sa ating page that you can share it to our students. Okay? So, ayan po, naging part na siya ng syllabus nyo or naging part na siya ng courses nyo. So, thank you very much po sa lahat. Bye-bye!